of the morning, me lads, and happy St. Patrick's Day. Of course, we are not recording on St. Patrick's Day. We're recording a few weeks in advance, but this is going to be put up on YouTube on St. Patrick's Day. What would you all wish the audience a happy St. Patrick's Day, my two lovely guests?
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
And the franchise we are going to be talking about is the Leprechaun franchise, which is a franchise I have spoken about before, a few years ago, back in... Fuck, I can't do this anymore. Yeah, no, the Leprechaun franchise, it's a franchise I've talked about before on my YouTube channel. Back for St. Patrick's Day of 2012, I reviewed all the movies, and then when the reboot came out, I reviewed... For St. Patrick's Day of 2015, I reviewed the reboot, so I've spoken about this franchise before. The Leprechaun franchise, this is a series that holds a lot of sentimental value for me, but I totally understand why people do not like this series. Objectively speaking, they're all pretty bad, but they're pure guilty pleasures for me. I enjoy each one except the reboot, which we'll get to. But what do you guys think of the Leprechaun franchise?
You know, I enjoy it a lot. I remember watching them a lot when I was a kid and just loving them. And, you know, I agree. They are a guilty pleasure, and I still enjoy watching them now. But, yeah, lately I can see that, yeah, they are pretty bad movies. I mean, yeah. But nonetheless, I enjoy them.
I think the simple fact that it relies on such a silly central premise is like that's what helps it, because you can't go into this thinking it's going to be something amazing. You know, you got to expect it to just be like just good, silly fun, and most of them are that. So
yeah,
I like it for that. It's just like fun to watch, and there's always like St. Patrick's Day marathons, like when they I think Sci-Fi does it like every year. So, yeah, in that way you can enjoy these.
Yeah, they're just like, it's funny, we've talked about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and the Friday the 13th franchise, and both of those series, like, while they have their goofy installments, both of them started out pretty serious, especially Nightmare on Elm Street, whereas Leprechaun has been goofy since day one, and there's really none of these films you could really analyze at all. They're just meant to be pure fun, I think. Although, I will argue, though, that I think the later ones, they knew exactly what they were, so I think they're good in that regard, because they knew what they were. They knew what they wanted to be. But yeah, I have a lot of fun with this series. My only issue with the Leprechaun franchise is the lack of continuity between each film, because I'm like a huge continuity person, and there really is no continuity between any of them. Like, I would actually almost call the Leprechaun franchise an anthology series, where each film has the same character, but they're all completely in their own universe and not connected at all to the other one. At the same time, I've come up with my own fan theories kind of connecting all the films, but that would take forever for me to actually get into that. I'm actually surprised, because I know there were Leprechaun comics. I'm surprised they never tried to do a comic book series or a graphic novel that tries to bridge the continuity between all the films. Would be kind of a tremendous undertaking, but... Yeah.
I mean, it's not like too far gone, though, because I mean, like, Pumpkinhead just got a comic, and I think that's actually trying to like merge all those movies into one sort of like umbrella blanket continuity. So yeah, I could see that, and I'd read the shit out of it. So I hope that happens.
You know what? Whoever holds the rights to the Leprechaun franchise, no joke, I'll write it. I'll write that comic book. But, yeah, that's my biggest issue, is just the lack of continuity. Now, I know some fans have tried to speculate that maybe they all are in the same universe, but it's a different Leprechaun each time.
I can see that.
That's the way I look at it, actually. Yeah.
At the same time, though, it's like, I like to think that this is the same character in each film, but once again, there's that big continuity problem between each movie. But once again, I really do love this franchise. Objectively speaking, they are pretty bad, but they're enjoyable. They're guilty pleasures for me. I just want to briefly apologize. During our discussion of the first Leprechaun movie, my dog absolutely would not stop barking. I just want to apologize in advance. But now on to our discussion on the first film. So let's start at the beginning. 1993's Leprechaun. What do you guys think of Leprechaun before I get into my thoughts?
Yeah, it's a fun movie. objectively speaking, it's not a very good movie, but, it's a lot of fun, and it's also fun to see Jennifer Aniston in her very first role before she made it big.
Now, wasn't she in other stuff before? I know this was like her first theatrical movie, but wasn't she in like some TV movies?
Yeah, I think she was
prior to this.
She was in this TV revival, I think, of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, it was the they did a TV series
Yeah.
based on Ferris Bueller.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure about anything else she did before Leprechaun, but I didn't know about that. But yeah, this I think was her first major motion picture, and I remember reading in an Entertainment Weekly retrospective on the whole series how, the director wanted her for the role after liking her audition, and I forget if it was the producer or owner of Trimark Pictures who said, okay, you can cast her, but you have to make sure she bleaches her hair blonde. And of course, the director didn't want to do it, and Jennifer Aniston said, I don't want to do it, because she had that beautiful auburn hair that later, of course, became famous along with her. And the director told her, you're not going to do it. We'll tell them that we're going to do it, and then just start filming. And that's what happened. And I remember the founder of Trimark, or whoever was also interviewed, said, oh, I don't remember that at all. I just, And I can't help but think that he says that because he doesn't want to admit that he almost turned down Jennifer Aniston.
I didn't even know about the bleach blonde thing and that she was on Ferris Bueller. That's wow. Me, like, I think it's good because it kind of plays it straight, even though it's a cheesy concept. Like, and they do sort of they treat him as threatening at times, as much as you wouldn't be able to take it seriously. But something that's interesting is people act, I think, surprisingly realistic. Like, people always give shit about how, like, people will react to stuff in horror films. And this, like, I think it's the scene where he just stepped into the bear trap.
Yeah.
And he, like, literally just starts, like they just start hitting the leprechaun with shit, like 4 of them. And in real life, that's what happened. You just start ganging up on him and just, like, beating the shit out of him. So, I mean, it works on, I guess, 2 levels.
I don't know. I would kind of fight you that they act realistic. I mean, I don't know. Personally, I'm not a fan of the characters in this. The only character that I actually really liked was Ozzy, the guy who was mentally challenged.
He was sympathetic.
Yeah, he was. This is something I want to talk about, is I feel like this film really doesn't know what it wants to be, because there are points where it almost plays out like a kid's movie, and it's like, I almost feel like, and I heard that Mark Jones was kind of going for that, but Trimark, like, basically insisted that they reshoot stuff to make it more violent to appeal to an older audience.
Yeah, I've heard about that, and also the way Warwick portrayed the Leprechaun kind of amped up the comedic factor of it a lot.
Yeah, this was originally going to be more of a straightforward horror film, but it was Warwick's idea to make it a horror comedy, which in a way works better. I mean, the comedy in the film is, I'm sort of mixed on the comedy. Some of it I think is a little funny, but I thought it was funnier when I was a kid. Looking back on the movie now, personally I do think it's kind of a lame movie, but it's a movie I enjoy mainly for the nostalgia factor.
Yeah, same here, and I just want to say that while the majority of the movie is pretty silly, I do find in the beginning where the Leprechaun imitates Dan O'Grady's wife's voice after he just killed her, and he's moving her head with his hands. I found that to actually be pretty creepy.
I actually will say that there are some creepy moments in the film, like when the leprechaun is pretending to be like a little boy singing Mary Had a Little Lamb, or Twinkle Twinkle.
Little boy, I thought he was pretending to be a little girl.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Little boys, little girls are the same thing.
Right.
Sure, let's go with that.
Yeah. But no, I mean, like, so it has some creepy moments, and it's like, even though I do consider it to be a horror comedy, there are moments where it's clear Mark Jones was trying to be serious, which I personally think he kind of failed a little bit at that. Personally, I think, if this was going for more of a kids' horror film kind of thing, like sort of like Gremlins or the Monster Squad, it probably would have worked better. I actually think Joe Dante would have did a pretty good horror movie about a killer leprechaun.
I mean, it's pretty hard to be serious when the subject of your movie is a killer leprechaun,
You say that, but I was actually looking up stuff about some of the old legends of fairies and leprechauns, like the old Irish legends, and some of them are actually kind of creepy. Like, I would argue that if you had a good script, you probably could have made a serious horror film about a killer leprechaun work, but it would obviously have to be a good script. And while I enjoy this movie as a guilty pleasure, I do not think this is a good script.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
And as far as Jennifer Aniston in the movie, I think she does a decent job, but I freaking hated the character of Tori Redden.
Yeah.
I thought she was just such a bitch.
She starts out as very unlikable, although I think she should be given credit because later on she does do a lot to try to fight the Leprechaun. She goes all the way to the retirement home to try to get the information from Dan O'Grady. She's the one who brings back to the others that, yes, we have to find a four-leaf clover, so she's definitely a useful character.
Yeah, but she's such a bitch in the beginning. I can't, she's such a whiny...
Well, people can change.
I think that's kind of the point, is that, you have this protagonist who's kind of whiny and kind of sort of like a ditzy girl to some degree.
Yeah.
But then, through this experience, you empathize with her. So.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I would empathize with anybody in this situation, but overall I was not really a fan of her character. I thought she did an alright job, I just wasn't a fan of the character herself.
Yeah.
Once again, Ozzy was really the only character I thought I could feel sympathy for. And also, you had the kid Alex.
Yeah, I love the kid.
He was entertaining, but he was also kind of a little dick, too.
Yeah.
When he says to Ozzy, we'll get an operation to fix your brain. That way people won't make fun of you anymore. And Ozzy's like, people make fun of me? Not in front of you, only behind your back. It's like, wow, what a little fucking douchebag.
I know.
And then there's the scene where the leprechaun bites Ozzy's ear off, and he just smacks him in the face and tells him to suck it up.
Yeah.
In the truck, and you're just like, this kid is really fucking hardcore for his age.
Yeah, it's like, you try getting bitten in the ear by a killer leprechaun and see how well you are after that.
Yeah, another thing to go back to Tori Redden, another thing I didn't like about her character was she tried to take responsibility for Alex when it's like, Alex is not your kid. Leave him the fuck alone. Like, when Alex and Ozzy come to the diner and she's like, where have you been? It's like, bitch, that's not your kid. Stay the fuck out of this.
Well, maybe she just kind of developed some sort of sisterly affection to him, in a way.
I don't know. I was just not a fan of her character. And truth be told, I'm not the biggest Jennifer Aniston fan. She does a decent job in the movie, but...
I've seen her in a bunch of stuff after that. I never saw Friends, but I did see her in Bruce Almighty and... Horrible Bosses and Marley and Me, and, I think she's a very talented actress.
Alright.
And I gotta mention that scene in the movie where she's, doing something with the truck, and, the leprechaun is underneath and rubbing her leg, and she thinks it's Nathan. And then later, after he scratches her, she says to Nathan, I thought that was you rubbing my leg, and Nathan's just like, and you let me? And then her dad, who's also there, gives Nathan a look like, are you freaking serious with that crap right now? And then she says, oh, no, I know what it feels like when a man rubs my leg, and her dad's like, you do? That is gold.
Yeah. Gold. Was there a pun intended there?
Actually, no, there wasn't.
Lucky Irish.
Yeah, lucky the Irish.
I do want to point out Robert Gorman, who plays Alex in the movie. He was also in one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, Sometimes They Come Back. I don't know if either of you have seen that.
I've read the short story it's based on.
Okay, yeah, he was in the movie Sometimes They Come Back. The character he plays wasn't in the short story. He was somebody who was added for the movie. I just wanted to point that out because that's one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, and he played the main character's son in the adaptation of that. But once again, I personally think it does kind of fail. It fails as a horror film. It is one of those movies where it's more so... I like it almost because of how bad it is. For me, this is a so bad it's good movie. But I do think it could have worked had it had a better script and maybe a better director, Joe Dante. Once again, I think Joe Dante would have... Because personally, I think this should have probably been a kid's horror film, and I think Joe Dante probably could have pulled this off.
I could see that.
Or even if they wanted to go for a little more adult-oriented... I could actually see Sam Raimi directing, a horror movie about a killer leprechaun, or even Peter Jackson around this time probably could have done something like this.
Yeah, I mean...
Actually, even Full Moon, like the company Full Moon, I know they later on did do a horror movie about a killer leprechaun, but I think Full Moon probably would have done a pretty cool killer leprechaun movie around this time.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, they definitely, like I said, upped the comedic factor, and I mean, scenes like where the leprechaun is riding in that little go-kart and singing Ring Around the Rosie, I mean, you can't help but just giggle at that. It's so absurd.
One of my favorite scenes is when the leprechaun's riding the little car on the road and the cop pulls him over. It's like, aren't we a little young to be out this late? No, I'm 600 years old!
And then he claws his face, and it's all gruesome and gory. It's great.
That scene where he's like pursuing him through the woods is actually a pretty good horror scene.
Yeah,
and it's like silly as hell.
Yeah, he's like playing hide and seek with him.
Yeah. And there are points in this movie where the leprechaun is actually kind of animalistic in a way. Like, he really behaves almost like a creature.
Warwick Davis is just great in the role. He's just, you can tell he's having such a good time. And he just loves it, he, even enduring all those hours in the makeup chair, he gives it his all, which is just fantastic.
I love Warwick. I think he's like one of the more underappreciated people that work in the business. Because, like, dude, he never ages. He's so talented. And he's, like, kind of open to anything. Like, he's been on all kinds of stuff. So, he's just, like, woefully underappreciated. And this is a really good avenue for him to kind of just, like, stretch his legs and have fun. So.
Yeah, when he... When he said something to Entertainment Weekly for an interview a while back when they did a retrospective on the Leprechaun franchise that, when they brought him the script, he hadn't worked for a while. He said, "I didn't have any work for quite a while. It started to dawn on me that perhaps my good fortune of the 80s was drying up and I would have to look for a proper job. Then the script arrived, and after a couple of pages I was like, I want to do this. At that point, I think everyone was just seeing me as playing a good guy, having seen films like Willow, so I leapt at the opportunity."
Any closing thoughts on Leprechaun?
There's worse things to watch on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, it's a fun movie.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. It's awesome to see Jennifer Aniston face off against a killer leprechaun. Although, she actually does not look back too fondly on this movie whenever it's brought up. I remember there's a video interview where she's promoting Marley and Me, and the Irish interviewer says, "Would you care to apologize to the Irish people for Leprechaun?" And she said something like, "I was in Leprechaun. Didn't that punish me enough?"
If you look at the re-release DVD covers for it, they literally almost promote it like Jennifer Aniston versus a leprechaun, because they put her like they Photoshop her into the poster and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really like use her appearance to try to like publicity for it.
Now we come to Leprechaun 2, which was released in 1994, and personally, I think this is the best film in the franchise. I really do. And one of the reasons why I think this is the best film in the series is because I feel like this one knows what it wants to be more so than the first Leprechaun movie did, and also, like, they definitely up the violence in this, and this one is definitely clearly geared more towards adults, where the first one almost feels like it should have been a kid's film, and also I think this one has a much more interesting story than the first one did. So yeah, I personally think this is the best film in the series, but what do you guys think of Leprechaun 2?
I like it. It's pretty funny, and I thought it was interesting to make the leprechaun seek a bride, which was interesting.
Bride of the Leprechaun.
Yes, and I kind of like the opening where they set it 1,000 years before, at the time, the present, which was 1994. One of my favorite parts of the movie is definitely, right after he's captured Bridget and brought her to his lair. He just says, "We're going to have to make some changes to your face. The wee ones won't suckle if you don't look like them. They can be very demanding." I always crack up at that.
Many changes.
Yeah, I always crack up at that, and I'm like, oh god, what are those little monsters going to look like when they come out? Ugh.
Oh, I'd agree that it's the best one, because I like that it's... Unlike the first one where it was sort of just like that single-minded quest to get the gold, this one sort of almost tried to build a mythology for him about the bride and about like him coming back in the modern day and everything. But it also kind of sets the trend for each one is clearly like not necessarily a different leprechaun, but a different like mythology behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say this is probably my favorite one, the one that I have like the most fun watching and the one that I really get the most enjoyment out of. Yeah. Like the fan blade scene, I think, is probably my favorite part in terms just of like horror effects and all that.
And also, that character was such a douche.
Exactly.
Yeah, he was actually supposed to, in the original script, have a bigger role.
Oh, really?
In the movie. Yeah, they were gonna make him the one who, like goes with Cody to the Leprechaun's lair in the finale, but like he was gonna be like a former boyfriend of Bridget who cheated on her, so that's why she went with Cody. And after Cody just told him about the Leprechaun, he was going to help him, but then try to, push Cody in front of the Leprechaun's killer, go-kart or whatever it was. So, like, betray him, but then would eventually get his comeuppance at the end. But
oh, wow.
They actually, I believe, I read, filmed some scenes like that, but then, like, decided, okay, you know what, we're just going to reduce his role, and I think they was expand Morty's.
Yeah. I do want to point out this one definitely has sort of that fairy tale theme to it, where it's like somebody having to rescue a princess almost. Like, even though she's not actually a princess, it's the same basic idea. Like, a hero, a knight in shining armor, having to rescue like a princess or something from like in this case, an evil leprechaun.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has that vibe, and it's. I mean, I guess you could say they're all very whimsical in a way, all the movies in the series.
Yeah.
And, I also forgot to mention in that same scene I mentioned before when he just says, "Kiss me, I'm Irish," and then she, to her disgust, he licks her, and it's like,
oh that is
God.
a disgusting fucking scene.
I know.
I do have a lot of nostalgia for this one. I have nostalgia for the whole series, but this one in particular, like, I remember I saw this shortly after I saw the first one. It was actually on TV at like 3 o'clock in the morning on TV 55. I was like 12 years old at the time. This was around Christmas time of 2004, and it was just on TV, and yeah, I absolutely fell in love with this. Oddly enough, even though I did see the first one before this is the one that I feel like I have the most nostalgia for, oddly enough. But to go back to the characters, personally, I like the characters in this one a lot more than the characters from the first one. I mean, Bridget, she's a fairly likable character. There are points in the beginning of the movie where she's kind of unnecessarily a bitch, but as the movie goes on, you definitely feel sympathy for her, especially because she's being forced into a marriage by a demonic leprechaun. I mean, who wouldn't feel sympathy for somebody in that situation?
Yeah, I'm just curious, what makes you say that she was unnecessarily a bitch? Like, what does she do or say?
Just the way she was talking to Cody in the beginning, like, the way she was so mad at Cody.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I kind of understood why, because they were supposed to go on a date at the racetrack, and he was dragging her on this stupid scam tour.
Yeah, you got a point there. Maybe I'm being too hard on her, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, because Morty was too drunk to do it himself.
I do want to point out Morty is my favorite character in this whole goddamn franchise. I freaking loved Morty, and I think Sandy, how's he pronounce his last name?
Sandy Barron?
Barron, yeah, he steals this movie from even Warlick Davis, I think.
Yeah, he is a pretty funny character. I mean, the guy's a total scumbag, scamming people out of their hard-earned money with these ridiculous phony tours and, enterprises, and I mean, but I guess you could tell that he does still have some affection for Cody as his legal guardian, and once the leprechaun presents himself, he does try to fight him, although ultimately, he does let his greed get the better of him, and it costs him his life.
Yeah, I just love, like, the freaking drinking contest that Morty has with the leprechaun.
Yeah, that's great.
And freaking, he's drinking, like, the fake alcohol so he doesn't get drunk. Just showing you how much of a scam artist he is.
Yeah, and, his death scene is very well suited to his character, because, as the leprechaun says, you shouldn't have been so greedy. And, I felt sorry for him because of all the pain he was enduring, being that the leprechaun's whole pot of gold was in his stomach, and, probably pushing against his organs and making it, grow in size. But at the same time, it's like, dude, you realize you had this coming, right?
Yeah, it's like you should have seen it coming. Like, I still feel bad for him because he is my favorite character in the movie. I just love, like, the pizza scene where he's intentionally making the pizza guy wait outside for 30 minutes so he could get a free pizza.
It's like, dude, that probably gets taken out of the guy's pay, right?
Yeah, but he's such a dick, but I love him because he's a dick.
Yeah, I mean, and also, he just locks Cody in the closet, and it's like, dude, you do realize you're jeopardizing saving Bridget by giving into your greed, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he's unlikable in that regard, but still he's by far the most entertaining character in the movie.
Agree.
And, like, I love, like, when he tries to one-up the Leprechaun on some of the Leprechaun's rhymes. When he gets the Leprechaun drunk, he's like, you thought you were fast, you thought you were sporty, you thought you were clever, but not as clever as Morty. I'm paraphrasing that. That's not exactly how he said it, but I also love the didn't anyone ever tell you shouldn't drink and levitate line?
That is I'm sorry, but that's just such a stupid line.
It's funny, though.
Yeah, it's stupid and funny, but
I do want to talk about, like, some of the random-ass cameos from, like, pretty well-known celebrities in this movie, like Clint Howard, Billy Beck, who ironically played a similar character in the 1988 remake of The Blob. He plays the bum who gets the gold tooth ripped out of his mouth by the Leprechaun. You have Al White in this movie, Kimmy Robinson, Michael McDonald from Mad TV is in this movie.
I love that scene. It's so, because, like, you could tell, I feel like maybe they told them to just, like, improvise. Like, they didn't actually have, like, scenes down.
Which scene was that?
It's the scene where
the coffee shop scene.
Oh,
he boils that guy's face off.
One should never try to take a leprechaun's gold.
Yeah, that scene was pretty funny when he says, "Oh, you just kill me," and the leprechaun just says, "Now there's an idea."
Yeah. And then, like, Tony Cox in this movie, who ironically worked with Warwick Davis before. He was actually, I think he played one of the Ewoks in The Return of the Jedi, and he also was in Willow with Warwick Davis. I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, Warwick Davis in this movie, though, oddly enough, I think he's actually kind of more vicious as the Leprechaun in this than he was in the first one. Even though, as I mentioned before, in the first one, there was something kind of animalistic about the Leprechaun. In this one, they give the Leprechaun more of a human personality, yet somehow the Leprechaun just comes off as being more sadistic in this one to me.
Oh yeah, you can tell during Morty's death scene, like, even before he lets him out of the crate, that he's enjoying the suffering that Morty's enduring.
And then when Morty's like, "Help me," he goes, "Love to, friend, but you're all out of wishes."
Yeah, it's like, that's like him subtly saying that this is payback for you trying to get, one up on me,
Yeah.
Trick me,
This is the one where I think the puns really started up, because he didn't really have too many, like, puns in the first one. This is where they really upped the whole him rhyming and, like, him making all these... Some of them are lame, some of them I actually think are kind of clever. Yeah, like making all these weird puns and stuff. I do want to point out that this is the only film in the franchise that is overtly taken place on St. Patrick's Day. The other films never say when it's taken place. This one is actually taking place on St. Patrick's Day. I thought that was interesting. For a series about a killer leprechaun, this is the only one that actually overtly takes place on that day.
Well, maybe they thought it was, like, too obvious.
Yeah, maybe.
It works great for this one, though,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
I also want to point out the music in this movie. Personally, this is my favorite score for any of the Leprechaun movies, and I've actually used the score for this movie in some of my own videos. A few years ago, I did, for St. Patrick's Day, I did a comedy skit called Attack of the Invisible Green Leprechauns, which the whole premise of that was invisible green leprechauns invade Long Island, and me and my friend Matt have to stop them, and I used the music from this movie for that skit. I also did another skit called The Leper Gang, which was about a group of leprechauns who beat the shit out of me because I stole their gold, and I also used the music from this movie for that skit.
You gotta send me these.
Yeah,
You watch these.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite score for any of the movies. What do you guys think of the music from this movie?
I like it.
I'd agree. Now that you mention it, yeah, it's kind of, it has more of a prominence than the other ones do.
Yeah.
Who did it? I actually don't know.
Jonathan Ellis, I think is his last name. Mm-hmm. I would have to look that up. I'll put, like, in the video, I'll just have his name come up so you could just read the name for yourselves. I'm talking to the audience right now.
Yeah. Did any of you guys think in that scene where Cody's giving that fake tour to the people and they get kicked out from being parked in front of that house by that angry woman?
Oh, I love that scene so much.
And then he says, that was the final resting place of Bela Lugosi. And I'm just like, oh, I can just hear Bela Lugosi turning in his grave right now.
And then when the guy goes, then who the hell was that? his stepdaughter, Stella Lugosi. I love how she's like this stereotypical black lady. Go, don't you come near this house anymore, we don't need you, we are a happy family!
Poor Bela.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
That scene always cracks me the fuck up.
Oh, it does to me too.
I actually do want to point out there does seem to be kind of a weird influence of the vampire mythology on this movie. Like, the whole idea of the leprechaun seeking a bride, like, kind of goes back to in a lot of vampire stories. You have a vampire seeking either the ancestor or the reincarnation of his long-lost love. And also even, like, the leprechaun being afraid of wrought iron in this almost feels like it's taken off of how vampires are kind of afraid of silver and stuff. So there definitely seems to be sort of an influence of the vampire mythology on this movie. So that's why I thought like maybe the Bela Lugosi line was another like little reference to how they are taking off vampire myths or something. Although I do want to point out the whole wrought iron thing. Oddly enough, in some of the old legends of fairies and leprechauns, particularly fairies, they actually do say iron has a thing against fairies. Like, fairies actually are kind of afraid of iron, because there actually are stories from Ireland of fairies taking little babies away and then replacing them with changelings, and in some Irish traditions, they put, like, a thing of iron, like, right on a baby's crib to keep the fairies away, so I do think... So, I don't think the whole wrought iron thing was random. I think they were actually trying to take from the old legends of fairies and leprechauns in that regard.
I'd also like to just quickly mention, as far as celebrity cameos goes, this isn't really a cameo, but did either of you find it interesting when Morty and Cody are in the bathroom to see Andy Kaufman lives written on one of the stalls?
That's always stuck out to me.
Yeah, it sticks out to me too a lot. I'm a big Andy Kaufman fan.
Yeah. The director was just a big Andy Kaufman fan, so he was like, fuck it, let's do this.
Paying homage to him.
Yeah. I do love the Tony Cox cameo where he comes into the bathroom and he's like, "Hey man, want me gold?"
It's real milk chocolate.
And then the freaking gold tooth thing.
Yeah, I mean, I felt bad for that bum at the beginning.
Oh, yeah, I felt bad for him, too.
Yeah, I mean, the poor guy was just, obviously has a hard time getting by as it is, and then he gets his gold tooth ripped out by a leprechaun. And rinse.
Sit back, me friend. You may feel some pain. It's a pity I forgot me Novocaine.
Of course, how does a leprechaun even know what a dentist is? You know?
He's a demon, you know, maybe they can read minds and shit. So it's like, he reads the, bum's mind in...
But then how come he couldn't read Cody's mind later when he tricked him with the...
I don't fucking know. You're asking too much of me. I do want to point out the Rotten Tomatoes score of this movie, because I don't usually put that much stake in Rotten Tomatoes to begin with, but the Rotten Tomatoes score, this movie has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I can understand why people don't like the Leprechaun movies, but to me that's bullshit. I think this is easily the best film in the franchise, and it has a freaking 0% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, but that's just for all the critics who were on Rotten Tomatoes. That doesn't represent everyone's opinion.
Yeah, I know. I just don't... I personally hate Rotten Tomatoes. I do not put that much stake in them at all, and it just makes me sick when I see on DVD covers... 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, like that actually means something.
People are overzealous in their critiques of it, because, like, I mean, this is meant to be just, like, a silly, cheesy movie, and there's way fucking worse movies. Like, just in terms of production value, shit that you can't even watch without your eyes hurting, like, the stuff they have on Mystery Science Theater.
Yeah.
Like, those are terrible movies. Like, this is a silly movie with, like, a decent production value, so you can't shit on it that much.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you think it's ridiculous, but, I mean, you know, they're fun to watch, so how much can you knock them?
Yeah. Now we move on to Leprechaun 3, which was released in 1995, and this was actually released straight to video when it came out, because Leprechaun 2 did not do very well theatrically, but oddly enough, this was actually, from what I heard, the highest selling VHS tape for a straight to video movie at the time. But I do have a lot of nostalgia for this one as well, because this is technically my first Leprechaun movie, because I first saw a scene of this movie when I was only like 3 or 4 years old. It was on TV, and I didn't even know what it was. It was the scene where Mitch is getting electrocuted by the robot woman, and I just remember that scene in a Leprechaun, and that's all I remember from when I was a little kid. Years later, I saw bits and pieces of it, like, during the summer of 2004 when I was 12 years old. Then a few months later, around Christmas time of 2004, ironically only a week after I saw Leprechaun 2, I saw this at 3 o'clock in the morning on TV 55. TV 55 would play these movies a lot, and that's when I saw the whole movie, and I found out that scene I remember from when I was a little kid was in this movie. But what do you guys think of Leprechaun 3?
Oh, I love this one. It was the first one in the series that I ever watched. I remember my family was on vacation somewhere, and they had like a video rental store, and I remember looking through the videos they had, and Leprechaun 3 was one of them, so I asked my parents to let me rent it, and they did, and I watched it that night, and yeah, I loved it. It was awesome. It was hilarious. It was funny. The death scenes were great and over the top. And one thing I want to mention about this one, is that in my opinion, this one, and maybe to a bit of a lesser extent Part 4, they, in my opinion, have the most entertaining human characters. I mean,
I could see that, yeah.
Morty was an entertaining character, but he was only one character in Leprechaun 2. 3 and 4 definitely have a lot of entertaining human characters that can, be entertaining even when the Leprechaun is not in the scene with them.
Yeah. I do want to point out this one definitely ups the comedy. Even though the first two were definitely horror comedies, this one ups the comedy to a even more ridiculous degree.
Oh yeah, and it's great.
What do you think of Leprechaun 3?
I like this one because maybe this is a bit of a reach, but there is like some subtle satire, because the idea of putting him into Vegas is pretty hilarious, because he's a leprechaun obsessed with gold, now surrounded by like the modern iteration of gold.
Yeah.
And when you go to Vegas, there's like slot machines that are like Luck of the Irish themed and Leprechaun themed. So it's almost like he almost becomes like this goofy mascot, like running around Vegas killing people.
I love when he passes like the golden nugget. Golden nugget. I like one of those.
And I want to point out that the guy who plays Scott in the movie is an actor/writer named John Gattens.
Yeah, he actually was nominated for an Oscar for Flight, I believe.
Writing Flight, yes. Yeah. And
he also co-wrote Kong Skull Island.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
shit, I didn't know that.
Late last year, I wrote him a letter asking him some questions and for an autograph, and he responded. And one of the questions I asked him was, what was working with Warwick Davis on Leprechaun 3 like? And he said, I loved working with Warwick Davis. He was smart and funny, and a great co-star. I have seen the work he's done in that last decade, and he's great.
Oh, wow.
What a nice guy.
Yeah.
It's cool that he's, like, even though he's an Oscar-nominated screenwriter now, he's still able to acknowledge, yeah, I was in this cheesy direct-to-video horror film.
Yeah, in fact, if I could just find it, there's something else that he said about it too, which was pretty funny.
I do want to point out that this is also this is apparently Warwick Davis's favorite film in the series.
Yeah, I've read that. He really, I don't remember what he exactly said, but he said he just really loved what the director did with the movie artistically.
I do want to point out this is directed by Australian filmmaker Brian Trenchard Smith, who is actually Quentin Tarantino's favorite director. He directed a lot of Australian exploitation films, and he also would go on to direct Leprechaun 4 as well.
I think Warwick's reasoning for it being the best was that it finally kind of got the comedy down, like it knew how to use it and like what was going to make people laugh and what was just like there to be like silly crap, and also kind of like get the horror aspect down too. So he feels, I think he feels that this is the one that really nailed the balance between the two.
Yeah, and the characters are just great, especially the casino staff.
Caroline Williams' character is such a
Loretta.
Loretta, yeah. Which I want to point out, her death scene, when I was a little kid, that always freaked me the fuck out for some reason. I don't really know why, because it's so ridiculous, but for some reason, every time I watched it, I was like, ugh.
He makes her look so grotesque right before he blows her up. He makes her ass, pop out. He makes her lips stretch. It's
I'll give you tits that come out to here.
And, because she's a vain woman, for most of the movie, she's kind of overweight and frumpy, and she wants to be young again. So when she gets her wish, she looks, in a lot of people's opinions, sexy again, and she's very vain. I mean, oh god, I remember she says something right after she gets changed.
My babies, like when the her tits disappear, she's like, my babies.
Yeah. And, she says, I wish I were a man so I could just screw myself to the floor. It's hilarious. She's like, it's like the character's so vain that she says something as just, what's the word, inappropriate and vile as that.
Yeah. I want to point out, like, the character of Scott, as we mentioned, John Gavins, who plays him. I actually do like the character of Scott. Yeah. He's a pretty fun character.
Yeah, and he's sympathetic. You know, he's a kid on his way to college, and he stupidly gambles it all away, so you feel sorry for him.
Yeah. And then you have Lee Armstrong, who I don't know how much she did after this, but she plays the character of Tammy. Yeah. And I want to point out, the character of Tammy is actually pretty likable, and you feel really sorry for her, but I hate to say it, Lee Armstrong's acting is actually pretty bad in this movie. The character I like, it's just the acting is really bad.
Yeah, I know how you feel. I kind of felt that way about Mark from Nightmare on Elm Street 5. I mean, I agree. The character is very sympathetic, and, you know...
Especially when, it's when Mitch makes that wish that, on the coin, that she'll sleep with him, and then when she gets out of that, she thinks he drugged her or something, and she says to Scott, it's not like this hasn't happened before. It's like, holy shit. Like,
yeah, I mean, although to be fair to Mitch, I mean, he didn't know that he was making the wish, and she came on to him, so he legitimately thought, okay, she wants to do it with me.
But you kind of get the implication that this guy probably did something similar to that. Maybe not to her, but to...
Oh, yeah.
He's such a sleazy character.
God, yes,
and there's even the implication that he might be involved with the mob in some way.
Oh, yeah, and, you know, there's that part where he sees Scott for the first time, and he's like, hey, are you old enough to be in here, kid? And then he looks at the check, and he's like, oh, my mistake. You're clearly old enough to be in here. It's like, you know he's not of age.
Yeah. What do you think of some of the characters in this movie?
I think this, honestly, between this one and 4 are kind of the two that I can take or leave in terms of the characters, which is ironic because, like, these are, I guess, the ones that Warwick had the most fun making.
Yeah.
They didn't really stand out to me as much as the first two, because actually I really liked kind of the smaller, tight-knit group of the first one.
Okay.
And then 2, you know, it was kind of the same thing, and then in this, I don't know, they all fell flat for me.
Alright.
And what about... I really like the character Fazio. I mean, he's such an asshole, and he thinks he has so much talent and that he's so great. It's like, dude, you're working at some, you know, low-down, trashy theater in this casino that's clearly having money problems. It's like, calm your ego down.
Yeah. And his death scene is gruesome, but also hilarious, especially, like, right after the Leprechaun chops him in half with the chainsaw, the Leprechaun does that thing with his hands. Like, it's so clear the Leprechaun is enjoying every moment of him killing this guy.
Yeah. Something tells me that even if Fazio had given him the coin that the Leprechaun demanded, that the Leprechaun would have still gone through with it and cut him in half.
Oh, yeah. Because the Leprechaun's sadistic. He doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah, and, I mean, Fazio's just... Yeah,
but am I the only one who's really concerned about what happened to that woman who went into the box and then the Leprechaun came out? Like, what happened to that poor woman?
He probably killed her.
Yeah.
And Fazio definitely, he has dreams of doing greater things, and he's probably, you know, I'm stuck in this low-down theater. It's terrible.
I do want to point out there is sort of a similarity between this, and I know this movie came out 2 years later, but Wishmaster, like, because, like, both this and Wishmaster are about people making wishes, and then the wishes backfire on them in a big way.
I mean, I definitely liked the idea of the coins giving people wishes, because then we get to see... I can't believe I'm saying this about a Leprechaun movie, but it almost gives these characters another layer to them.
Well, as Chris said, there is subtle satire in this movie. This is a much deeper, much more intellectual Leprechaun movie.
It's a thinking man's Leprechaun movie.
I can't keep a straight face while you said that or I said about the whole characters with layers thing. I just can't. It's too funny.
Now that you bring up Wishmaster, it's almost sort of like an antithesis to this. It's one you can take a little more seriously. And
Yeah.
actually, I love those movies.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess if you're looking for something that wasn't as silly as this, yeah, go for Wishmaster.
I do want to point out, like, some of the humor in this movie. Like, there's a brief little Star Wars parody where we forgot to mention how in the movie Scott is slowly turning into a leprechaun because he gets bitten by the leprechaun.
And the blood goes into him.
Yeah, and there's a scene at the end where the leprechaun's like, I will take you over to the green side. And they start subtly playing, like, the Darth Vader theme. Like, that was funny, and that might have been a weird little foreshadowing of Leprechaun 4.
And, but yeah, I can see that.
And then, you wanted to bring up
the... John Gatton's, I find it awesome how, he was able to, kind of struggle in Hollywood for a while, but now has found his calling as a writer. And he's still obviously willing to talk about Leprechaun 3. He said in an interview once, I'd love to say I didn't do well because I didn't get my chance, but the reality is that I couldn't really act. I was in a few horror movies, but hey, Leprechaun 3 is scary mostly because of my acting. I really had no idea what I was doing.
And I don't think he did that bad of a job.
No, I think he's alright, although his Irish accent is,
And, like, I love how he starts rhyming, too. Like, is that, like, something in the Leprechaun's DNA where they have to rhyme?
Oh, and also his love of potatoes.
Oh, yes.
His newfound love of potatoes when he orders all those different kinds of potatoes at the restaurant.
And, then there's the Indian food line.
Oh, yes.
When, the leprechaun bites the ear off that, Indian...
Gupta.
Yeah.
I think his name is, yeah, and he bites the ear off and he just goes, I like Indian food. It's so spicy.
It's so fucked up.
We didn't piss off enough Irish people with this franchise, so let's fuck with
Yeah, I don't think they'd be able to get away with a scene like that today.
Yeah, probably not.
Doubt it.
Yeah. And then there's also the scene where the leprechaun's pretending to be a nurse.
Oh.
It's like nobody's looking at, nobody's like noticing that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that scene because that reminds me, when Tammy brings Scott to the hospital and the doctors are examining him and then they see that he has all that cash. He's like, oh, well, he can afford a few more MRIs and a few CAT scans. And the nurse brings up, oh, but you golf on Thursdays. And he just goes, well, this is an emergency. And it's like, they're clearly robbing him. And I'm like, you're supposed to be medical professionals. What are you doing?
Well, if he didn't have health insurance, then, he needed to pay for it somehow.
Yeah, but they clearly were just saying, okay, we're just going to...
Do you take Green Cross?
We're just going to give him all these things, even though he probably doesn't need them, so he can take his cash. And then he, of course, gets rightful revenge against them and takes the cash back, which I was glad happened.
Yeah. I love when the leprechaun's gambling. We're kind of going all over the place with this movie, I know, but I love the scene where the leprechaun's gambling, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically says something to the effect of stealing gold from humans is awful easy.
And another thing I want to point out is, when those two mobsters that Mitch owes money to, go up to his apartment to find him dead and confront the leprechaun, and the leprechaun kills them, right before one of them dies, he says, tell me, what was Judy Garland really like? And I'm just like, what? Where did that come from? What does that have to do with
I never understood that.
In this scene, in this whole movie? It's so just out there. I just can't help but mention it.
And am I the only one who noticed that those two mobsters clearly had a thing for each other? Like, I kind of got, like, sort of a gay undertone with them. Like, they were both kind of, like, gay for each other.
I mean, was that what the Judy Garland line was supposed to reference?
I don't know.
It's I just love this one. I think it's a great entry in the franchise. And, love the characters, love the death scenes. And I just love how when Mitch is, like... After Tammy, comes out of it and kicks him in the balls, and he's like, you're fired! You're fired! You're teasing, ball-busting bitch, you're fired! And then he's like, I was going to make her a star, and then the leprechaun... I love how he appears on the TV in different guise disguises.
Oh, yeah.
And
I love when he's, like, the personal injury lawyer and stuff.
And the great part about that scene is that Warwick Davis, he even adopts different accents for it. Like, he says, I'll fight for anyone, even you, Mitch.
Yeah.
And I just love how multiple times he just tries to get up and say, hey, did I hear my name? But then the phony woman the leprechaun created knocks him back down.
Yeah, and it's funny that he finds hearing his name on the TV odd, but doesn't find the fact that a woman just crawled out of his TV odd at all. I get, like, you're kind of supposed to assume that the leprechaun has his mind under a weird influence because of his magic, but at the same time, it's like...
I just gotta mention how, after he first unknowingly makes the wish that Tammy would want to have sex with him. Tammy, I just want to say, the way she acts after that, when she just gets all... She's like, Mitch, oh, Mitch, I want you right now. Like, she does something to her voice that makes it sound all, for lack of a better term, slutty.
Yeah. And then when she smacks the shit out of him, and then he just smacks himself, go, no, let me do it!
I like my men rough.
Yeah. And then there's, am I the only one who thinks that this movie might have been a weird cash-in on Casino, because Casino came out this same year, and I almost feel like this was meant to be sort of a weird cash-in on that movie?
I would be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely worked because it sold a lot of DVD copies, a lot of video copies,
yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I just love this one. And, I just love how Fazio, when he makes his wish, he's so theatrical always. So right before, he starts to make it, but then right before he just does that weird hand movement that a showman magician does. Yeah, I just love that scene where the Leprechaun first goes into the casino and, Fazio he's being forced to just do these cheap tricks to entertain the masses. And he thinks the Leprechaun's a child, and he's like, oh, hello, little one. Would you like to see me pull a rabbit out of a hat? Like, he's still trying to put on an act, even though he's clearly disgusted by the appearance of the Leprechaun. And when he pulls it out, it's a steaming pile of green shit, and the Leprechaun just goes, it's made fresh at 9 a.m. And then he goes to talk with Loretta, and, even though he wiped it off, the stink is still on him, because she smells it.
Yeah.
Another thing I love about Leprechaun 3 is that scene where the Leprechaun does a few poses with Elvis. I mean, it's just great, And, I just like that he didn't kill Elvis, the Elvis impersonator, probably because he was, in such awe of him. And, they just part ways on good terms. And it's like, that's definitely how you should treat the king.
Now let's move on to Leprechaun 4 in Space, which was released in 1997 and was also directed by Brian Trenchard Smith. This one, it's weird. This one is, oddly enough, the one that I think I watched the most times out of all the Leprechaun movies, even though 2 is my favorite. This one I've watched the most times, but even as a little kid, I knew this one was ridiculous, and this is easily the most ridiculous out of all the Leprechaun movies. For a franchise that has been ridiculous since day one, this one just ups the absurdity to an absurd level.
Oh, God.
It takes the absurdity to space.
Yeah, I really enjoy this one a lot, and I must say that out of all the movies in the Leprechaun series, this one is definitely the most bonkers of the bunch. I mean, there's only one word to describe this movie, and that is bonkers. I mean, it is just... having the Leprechaun in space alone would qualify it as bonkers, but you also have the Leprechaun trying to get with this alien princess. You have this one-armed, half-man, half-computer, who then gets turned into this horrible insect monster. You've got a freaking android who later gets turned into this singing, like, floor show singing, dress-wearing android. I mean, it's just... it's so out there, but it's so enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, and I love how this one... the plot is very much taken off of both Alien and Aliens.
Yes.
It's basically the plot of Alien and Aliens mixed together, but instead of an alien, it's a leprechaun. And there are so many little sci-fi parodies in the movie, like a Star Wars parody where the leprechaun kills a guy with a lightsaber. There's the Alien parody, like, the whole plot is kind of taken off of Alien, but the fact that the leprechaun bursts out of the guy's dick. And even the leprechaun's death scene at the end was probably taken off of the way the alien died in the first Alien movie. And then, like, you have, like, a little Fly parody where when Mittenham, after he gets frozen with the liquid nitrogen, he just goes, help me, which I guess was sort of a reference to The Fly. Mm-hmm. Even when he goes, feed me, maybe that was a reference to Little Shop of Horrors. Mm-hmm. And then, like, you have the 2001... parody where at the end when the leprechaun middle finger goes up, they're playing the 2001 Space Odyssey music. So there's so many little parodies on different sci-fi movies in this film.
It's the first time I watched it, I don't know what it was. I think it's just because I found it so cheap looking that, like, it kind of became the one I could take or leave. But since I rewatched it, I'm like, okay, you know, obviously you were talking about just how insane, like, the ridiculousness gets amped up when you try to put it to space, which is how, if you try to put anything with, like, a sci-fi bent, it becomes. Like what happened with Jason. Yeah, you know, it's if you just embrace that, it's fun to watch, and I really like the ending for that 2001 parody with him flipping off the giant finger, flipping them off. It's so funny.
There's almost a part of me. It's almost like this is the movie flipping off the audience.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, and I actually really liked the character of Styx, the black guy, who I love that actor. He was also in Return of the Living Dead, and he was in Friday the 13th Part 5, and he was in a couple of movies.
Yeah, I just love when he just says, "Do I look like a fly to you?"
Yeah. But yeah, I have a lot of fun with this movie. Objectively speaking, this is probably the worst of the series, but it's like, it knows exactly what it is. It's like, they're not trying to take this seriously at all, so if, like, it's really a movie for people who don't have sticks up their asses, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You know, and like Leprechaun 3, it has a lot of entertaining human characters, you know. Dr. Mittenham and Harold are both very entertaining. In fact, Harold, this guy, in my opinion, is quite possibly one of the biggest perverts I have ever seen in a movie. I mean, when he's got the alien princess lying there and she's unconscious, he's like going to town all over. He's putting his hands on her, and he's
then Mittenham's slowly coming up from behind him on the TV screen.
Yeah, and he doesn't even say anything right away. He lets him do it for a few more seconds. And he's going, yes, yes, yes. It's like, oh, God.
And I love when Mittenham's, like, telling Harold about, like, the things that how he became an android, and, like, apparently there was some kind of experiment that happened,
he was trying to become, like, half human, half computer, like a hybrid, and I just love when Harold goes, oh, and something went wrong. And he goes, no, it all went according to plan. Moron! Look at me!
Which, to a certain extent, Mittenham is almost sympathetic, because if this guy used to be human, I would feel bad for anybody who gets turned into a freaking robot.
Yeah, but at the same time, he's also such an egotistical asshole. Like, when they come...
Kinda like the Wizard of Oz. I only think running things from behind a curtain.
Yeah, and he also, like, when the squad commander, if that's a good way to call him, you know, when he says, you know, the Leprechaun has offered to spare us if we give up the alien princess, you know, that's obviously the right thing to do, but Mittenham's like, no, you must kill him. And he essentially blackmails them into doing it by saying, yes, your contract is up soon, but I have the right to extend it, and if you don't do what I want you to do, yeah, he'll have them shot for treason.
Yeah. So he's such a piece of shit. He's almost like a secondary antagonist in the movie.
Yeah, I want to also talk about the character of the commander, who's just, I swear to God, almost every line of dialogue he says he's yelling it. I mean, it's like, yeah, he's a commander, and I mean, he definitely comes on very strong. I mean, the first time at the beginning, you know, when, I forget what her name is, she, from Dr. Mittenham's medical staff, comes to join them.
Oh yeah, Reeves, Dr. Reeves.
Yeah, he just immediately goes, well, I'm busy, what the fuck do you want?
I'm Dr. Reeves. Great! Dr. Reeves is here!
Yeah. But, I mean, he actually does become sympathetic, because you do find out from another character that, you know, he helped another soldier, carried him on his back.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked the characters in this movie. As goofy as they were, I still thought the characters were very likable in the film. Obviously, except for Mittenham and except for Harold. But the other characters I enjoyed a lot.
Yeah, and I just want to talk about what was up with the Leprechaun essentially turning the sergeant into a woman.
I don't know. I think it was, like, because he was always so masculine, the Leprechaun wanted to do a parody of that. Like, now we're going to show him what kind of man you really are.
Yeah, he's singing that lounge jazz song in a dress and lipstick, and I'm like, this is just bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, first of all, like, how did he even get him under his spell? It's like, first he made the dynamite appear on him. Did that do it, or? Well,
the Leprechaun has magical powers. He used his magical powers to... If he was always an android, he just used his magic to reprogram him. I mean, how did the Leprechaun turn Harold's head into clay and squash it like that?
Yeah, that scene is pretty disgusting and gruesome. I mean, he just flattens his face and makes it grow to a deformed proportion, and it's, and he still moves for a few seconds after he does it, and it's like grotesque. It's like it belongs in a freak show.
Yeah. And I love when the leprechaun and the princess are turning Mittenham into the scorpion slash spider hybrid, and he's like, spazzing out, and the leprechaun's making fun of it, going, oh!
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that, and oh god, that spider-scorpion hybrid is quite a sight to look at. I actually think that's a pretty good special effect, that's what they did with that. And I just love how, after he does that, he's trying to, make a log or something, saying, due to interference, my experiments have failed, and I have become this horrible creature, and losing human functioning. And he just intercuts with, I need flies, I need flies. But then he tries to, oh, no, must save the ship, after the leprechaun detonated it.
And I love how he's more concerned about trying to save his work than trying to save the lives of the other people on the ship.
Because he doesn't care.
Yeah.
must save the ship, must hold my work.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun with this movie. I also love how how there's this sort of gag in the movie how both the princess that the leprechaun wants to marry and her, they both want to kill each other, right after the marriage, which I think is just hilarious.
Oh, it is. And the princess's way of telling the soldiers that they're going to be killed is just priceless. I mean,
oh, yeah. Oh, hurt me first.
I mean, baring her breasts, it's like, she's clearly not aware of how human males work.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a fun movie. It's bad, but I love it.
And the scene where the leprechaun comes out of the guy's dick is just great. Remember, always use a prophylactic.
Yeah.
God, that was so tough to watch the first time. It was like, can you imagine that?
Yeah, it happened because he peed on the leprechaun's remains after they blew him up. And it zooped right into him.
And I love when Styx goes to the guy, I'll give you a round of applause, but I see you already got the clap.
Why do you guys think Brian didn't come back for the next one, considering Warwick was so fond of him as a director?
I mean, he just wanted to move on to other things.
Probably.
Now on to Leprechaun in the Hood, which was released in 2000. This is actually my second favorite film in the franchise, next to Leprechaun 2. I really have a lot of fun with this movie. Once again, like all the Leprechaun films, I totally get why people don't like this movie, but I enjoy this film quite a bit. What do you guys think of Leprechaun in the Hood?
I wouldn't say this one is one of my favorites.
Oh, you stink, Jeremy, you stink.
I can't help it. But, yeah, I mean, it's got some creativity about it, and I actually do like that they took a cue from Leprechaun 3 and had the medallion be the leprechaun's weakness, and it turns him to stone. I like that they brought that from that movie. I mean, this franchise, for the most part, has no continuity, but that is like a little smidge of continuity that this one had with 3 that I enjoyed.
Yeah. What do you think of Lep in the Hood?
I actually like In the Hood a lot, because it goes... Oh, sorry. It goes right for the culture shock of, this ancient Irish, little creature, being put into, a modern urban environment. And it really plays that up, and it's really funny. The simple fact that they got iced tea in it,
Yeah, it's like, how the fuck did they get iced tea in this movie? Which I do like his character, because his character is a pretty good secondary antagonist in the film.
Such an asshole.
I know.
Our music doesn't promote good shit. Our music just about kill people, smack your bitch up, all this fucked up stuff he says.
Give him the goddamn flute. And I love how he takes it so seriously, and it's so freaking silly that they're fighting over a goddamn flute. But of course I get it, because the flute's magic, but it's still so silly when you break it down.
Yeah, I found it interesting that the main thing the leprechaun was after was a flute instead of his gold, which
he got his gold back, technically. Yeah. He got the gold back from when they sold it, but all he needed was his flute.
Which was a nice change-up.
Something I pointed out to you earlier was, actually, when you think about it, the Leprechaun would adapt really well to hip-hop, because he's been rhyming throughout all these movies, so, and obviously the ending, we finally get to hear it.
Yeah, the Lep in the Hood song. I come from the land of the Irish spring. Dublin's the place where I learned my thing, and I don't know the rest of the lyrics, but it's so... Lep in the Hood, come to do no good. And I love how he says, I'm so bad, I'm good. And it's like, yeah, that's the entire series right there. But I really do have a lot of fun with this movie. oddly enough, even though this is a comedy, there are some weird serious elements, which I think the serious elements in the film actually make the comedy even funnier because it's like, it's so silly, yet the actors are taking it so seriously. To a certain extent. Like, obviously, the scene where, like, the guys are running from, Mac Daddy and they go into the closet and they're like, they all, like, bump each other's fists to show that they're all together in this. Butch does it to the Leprechaun without even realizing it.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, and then they all scream like it's a Scooby-Doo cartoon almost. Like, I really do like this movie. I know I shouldn't, but I really have a lot of fun with this. It's one that I kind of grew up watching along with all the other ones. And, what do you guys think of some of the characters in the movie? Because I actually do like them. I mean, they're cliched, but I enjoyed them.
The main characters are pretty sympathetic. They're trying to make it big with rap, and unfortunately they keep getting turned down. Although, I did not like how they just try to swindle two shop owners with a guitar that they forged Jimmy Page's signature on.
Jimi Hendrix.
Oops.
Jimi Hendrix. The real Jimi Hendrix. Boy, where'd you get this guitar? It was my Uncle Junior's at Psychedelic Palooza in 1971. And it's like, even though Jimmy died in 1970.
Yeah, then they try to fool the Asian shop owner.
Which I want to point out, that Asian character, even though he's played by an Asian actor, that character is such a horribly racist caricature of an Asian person.
Yeah, they would not be able to get away with that now.
Yeah. What are you, stupid? Everyone knows Jimmy died in 1970.
We just keep lampooning race in these movies.
I don't know what's worse, him or the Indian food line from Leprechaun 3.
They're both pretty fucking bad.
Yeah. And then, like, how the guys try to hide out. When they're hiding from Mac Daddy, they hide out at this transvestite's house.
Yeah.
Which I thought was, like, really... It's like, okay, they're clearly acting like being a transvestite is humorous, which obviously we realize, no, it's perfectly normal if that's your thing, but yeah, they're definitely using, like, cross-dressing as humor in this movie. Like, even at the end, when they're trying to get close to the Leprechaun, they both dress up for no reason.
Well, they do that because the Leprechaun has been controlling all these women by brainwashing them and making their eyes green.
Yeah. But I love how it's like, they actually think that's gonna fool the Leprechaun, which I guess you're supposed to assume since the Leprechaun's high, maybe that's why it fools him.
Oh yes, the Leprechaun gets high quite a lot in this movie.
A friend with weed is a friend indeed, but a friend with gold is the best, I'm told. I also really like the line when the Leprechaun first gets freed. Well, not when he first gets freed, but when he gets freed, like, in present time, and they're stealing his gold, he goes, "Surrender now, you thieving hoods! You got more loot than Tiger Woods!"
Oh, God.
Which makes me wonder, how the fuck does he know Tiger Woods is?
Yeah, that's what I mean...
And then what about, like, the weird cameo from Coolio, where Coolio just shows up for no reason?
This was during a period where he was making weird cameos and everything, so this just kind of like, it was sort of just like riding the horse on that one.
Didn't he make a cameo in Batman and Robin?
Yeah.
Oh, did he?
Forever. Yeah, he was one of like those people at that rave race thing. Yeah. So.
Okay, and I just love how it's him playing himself, and Postmaster Pete goes, "Yo, that Coolio," and that scene is hilarious, where they start going, "Jesus loves me, this I know. If he don't, I'll find a hoe," and they're clearly offended, everybody there.
Oh, right, they're singing in the church.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, that part is pretty funny.
And then the freaking priest, when Stray Bullet grabs the priest's gun from under the thing, and the priest is like, "Yo, Youngblood, how do you know about my gun?" And he's like, "Yo, who don't know about your gun?" Any closing thoughts on Lep in the Hood?
Yeah, I pulled up a good quote from Warwick Davis about working with Ice-T.
Ooh.
He had this big Mercedes. He'd park it outside the trailer, and this music would thump from it during the night shoots. I don't know if he was listening to his own music or somebody else's. It was just this thumping. Boom, boom, ba-doom. One day he came flying into my trailer and he looked distraught. I said, "What's up?" He said, "I've lost something. Mind if I have a look?" He started tearing the cushions out of all the seats in the trailer, and he pulled out the biggest piece of gold chain you've ever seen in your life from the back of the chair. I could have probably retired if I'd gone down to the pawn shop with that.
Yeah.
There's a great irony to that.
There
He's
is.
the leprechaun and he's going through his trailer looking for gold. It's like, wow. That's some scary, like, metafiction shit right there.
Yeah. That's what they should have done with this franchise, like a metafiction one or something.
One
like,
where, like, Warwick is, like, the star, but, like, for some reason the leprechaun is real. Almost like New Nightmares. So,
Yeah.
that would have been great, actually.
Now let's move on to Leprechaun Back to the Hood, which was released in 2003. I actually first saw this movie years after I saw all the other ones, because I have the first 5 on the Leprechaun Pot of Gore box set, which was released before, I think was released before Leprechaun Back to the Hood came out, so I didn't see this movie till years after I've already seen the other ones, and I will say, out of the entire series, not counting the reboot, this is probably the one I've watched the least. I still enjoy this one, but I don't enjoy it as much as the others. But what do you guys think of Leprechaun Back to the Hood?
I mean, I'll be honest, haven't seen it in a while, but I remember I enjoyed parts of it. You know, I enjoyed the scene where he rips the woman's teeth out. That was pretty gruesome, and yeah, because he wanted to, I think, to get the gold that she converted into a tooth or something like that.
And I love, like, when she shoots him right before that and goes, goddamn crackers, so he's breaking into, I'm not going to say the words, houses. Yeah, this one, I would say it's one of those deals where it's like, if you like the Leprechaun series, you'll like this. If you don't like the Leprechaun series, you're not going to like this. It's a standard film for this franchise, I would say. I think it's interesting how they actually do 2 ghetto-themed installments of this series in a row. And this is, oddly enough, the only one where you could argue maybe there is some continuity, because the Leprechaun didn't die at the end of Leprechaun in the Hood, so it's not too far off to believe that maybe this is taking place a few years after the events of that movie, so I don't know, I kind of feel like the 2 Hood movies are the only ones where you could argue that there's some continuity.
I mean, something I forgot to mention when we were talking about in the Hood is the ending confused me, because, you know, you see the medallion about to go around the Leprechaun's neck, but then it cuts to, you know, one of the characters rapping, but then it's revealed he's under the Leprechaun's control. How the hell did that happen, you know?
I think that was maybe just a fake out that they did. What do you think of Back to the Hood?
This was definitely the worst one for a while until we got the reboot. Because I think it. What worked well for these movies was kind of like trying one concept out each movie. Like, okay, we're gonna do one where he's going after like a bride. We're gonna do one where he's in Vegas, and then one where he's in space. Trying to drag out kind of the Hood concept, I think that really worked against it, because I heard that originally this was going to be like on a cruise ship or something. Or
I actually heard it was going to be like on a tropical island or something, which that would have been fun.
Leprechaun goes on vacation, something like that. Like, that would have been fun.
It would have been like, I don't know if you ever saw the second Jack Frost movie, where
Yes,
Jack
did.
Frost is like on a tropical island.
Yes,
so
I did.
It probably would have been something like that.
I feel like that would have worked better, because everything in this just kind of, it's still like the same silly stuff we've had before, but it goes kind of stale, because you feel like the joke had sort of died with the previous movie. At least that's how I felt about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think until we got the reboot, this was probably the worst one.
Yeah. I did like the animated prologue at the beginning.
That was kind of interesting. Yeah. I like how they tried to dive a little more into Leprechaun's origin, even though since there's no real continuity between any of the films, you could assume the Leprechaun has a different origin each time. But then again, there is a part of this movie where the Leprechaun does say that he hints that he's 2,000 years old, which, like he was in part 2, so were they trying to do some continuity there? Like, that's why I do want to see something where they try to bridge the continuity between each film.
I feel like if they bridge it, they're inevitably going to get to the conclusion that these are all different leprechauns.
Yeah.
But, which I guess would work, but would also kind of feel weird, you know, because they're all so similar. But
Well, they're of the same species.
yeah, so I guess you could just...
Yeah, but we're of the same species, and we're not played by the same actor.
So I guess it's up to them. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird to bridge all this continuity stuff together, because they're so, like, out there.
I'll do it, though. I'll do it. I'll even make Leprechaun 4 in space fit in with the continuity perfectly.
I'd love to see that.
Now let's move on to Leprechaun Origins, which I think is the worst film of the franchise because this is the only one that's not a horror comedy. They tried to be dark with this one, but it just fails miserably. And it's like, as I mentioned before, if you actually look back at the old Irish legends of fairies and leprechauns, those old legends are actually really creepy, so I do think a serious horror film about a killer leprechaun probably could have worked. It didn't work with this movie, though. Yeah, this one, it's just forgettable as hell. Like, I saw the movie a few years ago for the first time when I did the review of it. Then I completely forgot about it, and I just rewatched it for this retrospective, and honestly, after we're done with this, I'm probably going to forget about the movie again. It's like, whether you like or hate the Leprechaun series overall, you can't deny that they're at least memorable in some regard. This one, there's nothing to it. Nothing at all. There's no personality to it at all. But what do you guys think of Leprechaun Origins?
It's terrible, and I agree, it's easily the worst one in the series. I mean, how could they not go with Warwick Davis again? I mean, he said that he'd do it in a heartbeat. I mean, instead they got this WWE wrestler to don this stupid, gray suit and just grunt a lot.
Which, to be fair, though, I actually thought the new design for the Leprechaun wasn't terrible, but I think the camera work did really bad injustice because, first of all, the movie's so physically dark that you can hardly tell what's going on, and then whenever you see the Leprechaun, not only is it dark as hell, but also the camera's like shaky and out of focus. Yeah. It's like you can't even see the fucking thing.
It's so fuzzy that when you do see it, the image just looks all distorted and grainy. It's like, did they even try with this movie?
Yeah. What do you think of Leprechaun Origins?
Yeah, I agree. It falls apart immediately because I'm actually a big WWE fan, and I was actually kind of excited to hear Hornswoggle was going to take over. I was like, if they do it right, this could work well. But no, like it's totally. The big problem is like it does not capture like the spirit of the Warwick movies at all, and it almost feels like sort of like another horror movie that happens to be about a leprechaun that almost kind of got permission to claim it was a reboot of the Warwick movies.
Yeah, because it's like, Leprechauns, it's not like that's copyrighted. Anybody could do a horror movie about a killer leprechaun, and actually there was a movie called Red Clover, which came out around a few years before this, which was also about a killer leprechaun. From what I heard of that movie, this movie actually seems to have more in common with that movie than the actual Leprechaun movies, so yeah, there was no reason why this was promoted as being part of the series, because the only thing this has in common with the rest of the series is the "fuck you, Lucky Charms" line.
Yeah. That's like the one tip of the hat, and it doesn't even really work.
So one of the characters is named Jenny, right?
Might be.
That was meant to be a homage to Jennifer Aniston.
Oh, really?
I don't know that for sure, but...
Yeah, honestly, it's like I forgot most of the characters. The only character that I kind of liked, and it's only because I like the actor, is the character of David, who's also played by the same actor who played Mark in Freddy vs. Jason. I liked that character, but only because I like that actor.
Yeah. He and Gary Chalk were both in Freddy vs. Jason. Gary Chalk in this plays I guess you could call him the head townsperson who tries to sacrifice them to the leprechaun.
Oh, yeah. Which he was actually a pretty good secondary antagonist. Yeah. But here's what I want to bring up about him. To me, that story was far more compelling than the story of these, because it's basically your typical cabin in the woods kind of horror film, but the story of this town having to sacrifice people to the leprechaun, otherwise the leprechaun will destroy them. I wanted to know more about that. To me, that's far more compelling than a bunch of annoying college kids who are trapped in the woods of Ireland. Like, I wanted to know more about this village, and especially the character of Sean. The character of Sean, I thought, was the most compelling character in this film, because he's the one who's dealing with this real moral dilemma, where it's like, I know I have to protect my town, but at the same time, we can't just sacrifice innocent people to this thing. And it's like, that would have been focusing on that town and that character, and even the relationship between him and his father would have been far more compelling than anything this movie focused on the wrong thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the whole town stealing leprechauns' gold, and now they have to sacrifice people to it, and blah blah blah. I think that was an interesting angle to go with. They just did not do it well, and I think Warwick's version of the Leprechaun could have worked well into a story like that.
Yeah, I could see that. And something that they could have done was you have this leprechaun in the movie that's very animalistic. What they could have done was maybe suggest that this leprechaun and others like it are controlled by higher up leprechauns or something, and maybe have Warwick Davis come back and
that would have been great.
Maybe he's the one controlling these low level leprechauns that are more like creatures.
Maybe you should write that comic. That's not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's just they missed so many opportunities with this, and the end result is just so crappy. And also, one thing I want to say is, as far as the main characters are concerned, why the hell would you just go off with some freaking person you don't know, let them drive you somewhere in a country that you're not, in some foreign country? Why would you go with them?
Because Ireland's a friendly country.
Yeah, not quite.
We'll just chalk that up to horror movie logic.
I know, but
that's disrespectful to all horror movies, because some horror movies have a very good logic, but this didn't.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Gary Chalk did a pretty good job. When we first see him, he appears very warm and inviting, and then he does a good job making the character very sinister later on, because they're responsible for it because of their greed. And I like how the son even says, "Well, maybe if y'all hadn't been so greedy."
Yeah.
It's like.
And he even says, "Why don't we just leave? Why don't we just leave this town?" But
because they're loyal to it.
Yeah, but once again, that would have been far more compelling than what this movie had to offer.
Yeah, I agree. It's terrible. And Warwick Davis, he revealed that he had been offered a cameo in the movie, but he declined it because he didn't want to mislead people into thinking that he was going to be playing a leprechaun in it when clearly he wasn't. And I'd say good for him, staying as far away from this piece of garbage, this piece of shit as possible. I mean, I have a feeling that had he accepted the cameo, they probably would have just had him briefly appear in the bar at the beginning, maybe done a quick pan, with the camera to him. It's like, that's not what we want to see. We want to see him as the leprechaun in the whole movie.
Yeah. So, any closing thoughts on Leprechaun Origins? Besides the fact that it probably shouldn't have been called Origins.
No.
The best thing about this movie is the artwork for the poster.
Okay.
I agree with that. I thought you were going to say that the best thing about this movie is that it ends. I mean, it feels like they definitely could have had something that would have been a great reimagining of the franchise had they been been paying more attention. Mm-hmm. But it just falls apart because they go for something that's a little bit more generic and a little more.
Yeah, and once again, maybe I would have forgiven some of this movie's problems if it wasn't so poorly made. Okay, you could make fun of Leprechaun in space, how a lot of the space sequences are clearly computer animated, but at least you could see shit in that movie. I could barely tell what was going on in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's so badly shot, and what was the director thinking when they were viewing the dailies for this movie? It's like, do you not see there's a problem here?
I feel like a lot of directors when they want to do something dark, they confuse physically dark with tonally dark. There's a huge difference between the two.
Yes, I agree.
It'd be funny as hell if you asked him and he seriously thought that that's what it was. He got two different things mixed up.
I mean,
you shot a whole movie with making that mistake, you asshole.
Yeah, I mean, and back to your idea about making this kind of animalistic leprechaun, kind of an underling for the true main leprechauns, like the one played by Warwick Davis. Yeah, that could have been great. It's like he's setting the dogs on them.
Yeah. Missed opportunity right there.
Big missed opportunity.
Yeah. And once again, I will pay good money to see a comic book series that tries to bridge the continuity between all the Leprechaun movies and maybe even this one. That would be fun, I think. And is it true that there was talks of a Leprechaun versus Chucky movie?
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, because I know Don Mancini commented on that before. Don Mancini, for those of you who don't know, is the man who wrote all the Child's Play movies. He actually said that he would be more interested in doing a Freddy versus Chucky movie as opposed to a Leprechaun versus Chucky movie. But what do you think a Leprechaun versus Chucky movie could work?
Sure, why not? Why not give it a try?
I would see it.
So would I.
Me too. Yeah, I mean they'd be equally matched. So
I don't know about that because
the Leprechaun has magical powers, and Chucky has magical powers to a certain extent, but he has to outright say certain spells in order to do it, whereas the Leprechaun could just
do it.
That'd be an interesting element of it is like the one form of magic versus another form of magic. But,
yeah, that would be kind of cool.
Oh, I wish they could do that. I mean, Freddy vs. Jason, I believe, was a huge success at the box office, so why not a Chucky versus Leprechaun movie?
You know what? I want to see Ash fight the Leprechaun.
I do too, yeah.
So, any closing thoughts on the Leprechaun franchise overall?
I love it. You know, they're not great films, but they're a lot of fun to watch, and they're guilty pleasures, and, you know, I've been watching them since I was a kid, so, you know, they're awesome. I love them.
I like them too. They're just good, like silly fun, and you get to see Warwick just have like the time of his life playing this ridiculous character, doing all these like sadistic things to people, and yeah, it's fun. Basically, that's pretty much how I sum it up.
Yeah, that's basically how I would sum it up too. You know what? I almost wish we got our friend Bill to talk about these movies with us, because I almost feel like he would have found subtleties in these movies and found social commentary in these movies. Like, he would have been like, you see, the Leprechaun films are actually a critique of American capitalism and the commercialization of St. Patrick's Day.
It's not a bad argument that you could say that this is meant to be sort of like a caricature of how Americans look at Irish culture to some degree.
Yeah, you could.
It's not totally out there, but you know, it's definitely first and foremost. It's just like watching this like insane little creature just like fuck with people.
Yeah,
like,
it's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, boys and girls. Thank you for sticking with us through this entire thing. And bye. Say goodbye, my friends.
Goodbye, everyone, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Top of the morning to you.